liberation, our day of liberation.
It's important to have opportunities for us to celebrate our oneness, our wholeness, our completeness, our dynamic selves. It's vital to African American people to have an opportunity, a date that heralds the importance of who we are as a people and what we've been through as a people.
Juneteenth gives African American communities a chance to reflect on their ancestors' struggles and achievements, and also to spotlight current issues.
There is a lot going on in this world. There's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and a lot of uneasiness. The foundation you have can kind of give you a little bit more of a sure footing, because you can look and say, well, wait, my family made it through this hatred. Somehow they made it through. Yeah, so take that strength and go up to the next level.
I love seeing the support that I get every year. It's always new people I'm meeting and hopefully collaborating with them so we can have Juneteenth and not let it die. It's so important.
If in my heart I do not yield, I'll overcome someday.
Beloved friends, on this Juneteenth, I wish to offer my reflections. A poem by Claude McKay. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and pinned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad hungry dogs, making their mock at our accosted lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed. In vain, then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us through dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. Wet though before us lies the open grave, like men we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. If We Must Die, Beloved, is a Shakespearean sonnet written by the Jamaican poet Claude McKay in 1919 in response to the Red Summer riots of 1919. It is a poem of political resistance. It calls for oppressed people to resist their oppressors violently and bravely, even though they die in the struggle. The poem has most often been called a resistance anti-Black racism poem. It does not limit its call for resistance to any specific kind of oppression. As a result, it has served as an inspiration to a wide variety of oppressed people around the globe as they fight for their rights and fight for their freedom. You see, the enemy is always on attack. Our enemies are multiplying day by day. They are always relentless. If we look in the text, the Bible, 1 Peter chapter 5 says, relentless enemies are like lions who are seeking who they may devour. In Job, the question becomes, where have you been? I've been looking to cause trouble. I've been looking to attack somebody, your people. This, of course, is the devil calling God. Where have you been? I've been looking for someone to devour. And so, beloved friends, as we think about the years the centuries of white power and privilege and white supremacy, and then combine that with guns, it is a very dangerous combination. And as I reflected over this past week and these past 2 months, and even just this week alone, 5 years ago, how strange it was that a man, young white male, unalarmed, killed 9 people in an AME church in Charleston, South Carolina. How strange it is that in this week alone, 3 men lynched in 2020, state-sanctioned terror. How strange it is that white people and corporations are now becoming woke to the racial injustices that Black and brown people, particularly Black people, have suffered for the last 400 years. How strange it is. What is the right context here? As we think about the cities of McKinney, Texas, and Baltimore, Maryland, and Chicago, and Ferguson, Missouri, and Long Island, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, Fairfield, Ohio, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the list goes on. How do we make sense of tragedy? How do we find meaning in violence? How do you explain to your daughter or your granddaughter the years of injustice? How do you explain, as W.E.B. Du Bois once asked, how does it feel to be the problem? This, beloved friends, gets to what is known largely in theological and religious circles as theodicy. The term combines the Greek word theos, which means God, and dike for justice, trying to make sense literally of justifying the ways that the God of oppression is in direct contradiction to the actions and the environment that his people suffer under. Essentially, beloved, theodicy asks the age-old question, why do good people suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is it that a 14-year-old boy who was walking down the street with candy and iced tea in his hand can die and there be no justice? How is it that a young woman sleeping in her bed can be stormed and waking up in her sleep only to be shot and killed, and yet there is no justice? This is the question of theodicy. This holiday is celebrated on the 19th of June to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people in the United States. This holiday was first celebrated in Texas, where on this date in 1865, in the aftermath of the Civil War, the enslaved people were declared free under the terms of the 1816 Emancipation Proclamation. Though we know, of course, that freedom was granted through really the 13th Amendment. The book of Amos, they're the minor prophet. And personally, Amos is probably one of my favorite minor prophets because he is the angriest of all the prophets. He condemns the leaders and the people who failed to provide justice for all God's people. But most importantly, Amos lets us know that God favors justice. We can find there in Amos chapter 6, the entire chapter speaks to this. God called Amos to go to the north to the northern part of the kingdom of Israel to confront the king and the others. And Amos says, woe to the city, to speak judgment to a people whose religion, society, and government had drifted far from the purposes and practices of God. Amos compels us to see the immorality and the injustices of their generation and to make right the past wrongs. But Amos also lets us know that while it took many to call for justice, while it may not look as if God doesn't do anything about the outrage, God is always watching. Amos, like the other prophets in the Bible, sniffed out injustice, particularly injustice that was done to the lost, the least, and the left behind. Amos called to speak out against hypocrisy, and even hypocrisy that occurs under religious prose. Amos was not impressed by power, position, or authority. He had a clarity of vision and the courage to confront those in power, especially those who use God's name to legitimize their actions. Oh, he asserts, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Justice. The Hebrew text, masafat, has to do with the right order in society, especially related to the poor and to the weak. Society, God's society, God's intentions for the world is meant to be ordered where the poor are cared for, where the weak find support, where the disadvantaged are not squandered. In God's society, in God's faithful society, the poor are continuously falling behind. Black lives do not seem to matter. Well, what does this mean for Christians today in the 21st century? What does this mean for Christians today and throughout the centuries? The message the prophet of Amos, and in fact the entire Bible is trying to tell us is that civilization cannot survive this way. That we have to have a responsibility to the weak, not necessarily by our wealth, and that we must care for the poor. Beloved friends, we are called to speak truth to power. We are called to seek injustice. I know Father's Day is approaching, and perhaps we need fathers to be like Amos, men who will speak truth to power, even if it kills you. Men who will put on the whole armor of God. Men who will not grow weary in well-doing. Men who will fight the good fight. Men who will finish their course. Men who will press towards the mark. This is not to exclude women. You see, beloved friends, the enemy has tried and keeps trying. I'm recalled when Jesus, our Savior and the political revolutionary, was dead and buried in the cold, dark, damp grave. They wanted to make sure he stayed dead. They tried their best. After beating him at an inch of his life, they stretched him wide, they put nails in his hand and his feet, they lynched him from a wooden pole, they punctured his lungs to keep him from breathing. And if that wasn't enough, the enemy said, you will remember how I said you would not give up. So they put him in a grave. And then they put guards outside of the tomb. They did everything they knew how to do. And all the while, God is watching. They took us from Africa. They displaced us. They took our language, our culture. Our graves became the Atlantic Ocean. We got to a strange land where we had to moan the blues and pick cotton and sugar canes and tobacco. They physiologically and psychologically damaged our consciousness. They emasculated our men. They raped our women. They told us we were nothing. They sprayed us with hoses. They said we would never learn to read or write. They hung us wide. They pierced us in our side, and they keep killing us using state-sanctioned terror. And so the question I have during this reflection is to the enemy: have you done everything you know how to do? You see, beloved friends, slavery did not wipe us out. Jim Crow didn't destroy us. Has the enemy done everything they know how to do? They're still trying. But when the enemy has done everything they think they know how to do, God still has another choice. God still has another play. God still has another plan. God still has another narrative. God still has another purpose. God still has another solution. And so if we must die, let us die pressed towards the wall, but fighting back. So we must be bold and say, I will not fear being pulled over. I will not fear going to a swimming pool. I will not fear being black. For I will worship an awesome and almighty God. And so if we must die, we die holding on to God's unchanging hands. If we must die, let us fight the good fight. If we must die, let us die, keep on having faith. If we must die, we die knowing that God errs on the side of justice. And if we must die, let us die knowing who our Father and our Savior is. They, the enemies, may try everything in their power. They may kill our bodies, but they cannot harm our souls. And we will fight and we will work until God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven ensures that Black lives matter. And just simply to let Black lives live. Beloved friends, our day is coming because there is a God. God of justice. Our day is coming because God rights the wrong. Our day is coming because God is a God who will make your enemies your footstools. God, our day is coming because Jesus said, blessed are the hungry that thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Our day is coming because we will not grow weary in well-doing, but in due season we shall reap the harvest if we do not lose hope. We ought to keep laboring for justice until our day comes. We ought to keep fighting for the right until our day comes. Young people, don't let this world discourage you, but keep fighting on the side of God. Mothers, don't let the evil one break your spirits, but have faith and grow stronger than their hatred. Fathers, don't let the evil one break your despair and your hope. For when our day comes, God will set enemies to flight and make everything all right. So bring your evil, bring your demonic spirit. You can either gather your lynch mobs, but behind us stands a God who can change the course of history. Put bullets in your guns, for if we must die, we will die pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. This is Juneteenth.